whispering like this is like way more of a struggle than I thought it was gonna be. But it's fine because it'll be funny, trust. With that aside, we've got our book here. Horus Rising again, Dan Abnett. This is technically the first in the series, but depending on which side you care about, it might not matter. I'm gonna bunch a lot of these names because they're difficult. We'll start by reading the prologue here. The Horus Heresy. It is a time of legend. Mighty heroes battle for the right to rule the galaxy. The vast armies of the Emperor of Earth have conquered the galaxy in a great crusade. The myriad alien forces have been smashed by the Emperor's elite warriors and wiped from the face of history. The dawn of a new age of supremacy for humanity beckons. Gleaming citadels of marble and gold fort celebrates the many victories of the Emperor. Triumphs are released on a million world to record the epic deeds of his most powerful and deadly warriors. First and foremost among these are the Primarchs, superhero beings who have led the Emperor's army of the Space Marines in victory after victory. They are unstoppable and magnificent, the pinnacle of the Emperor's genetic experimentation. The Space Marines are the mightiest human warriors the galaxy has ever known, each capable of besting 100 normal men or more in combat, and organized into vast armies of tens of thousands called legions. The Space Marines and their Primarchs leaders conquered the galaxy in the name of the Emperor. Chief amongst the Primarchs is Horus, called the Glorious, the brightest star, favorite of the Emperor, and like a son unto him. He is the War Master, the commander-in-chief of the Emperor's military might, the subjugator of thousands upon thousands of worlds, and conqueror of the galaxy. He is a warrior without peer, and a diplomat supreme. Horus is a star ascendant, but how much further can a star rise before it falls? Alright. Part 1. The Deceived One. I was there the day Horus slew the Emperor. I was there, he would say afterwards, until afterwards became a time quite devoid of laughter. I was there the day Horus slew the Emperor. It was a delicious conceit, and his comrades would chuckle at the sheer treason of it. The story was a good one. Torgadon would usually be the one to cajole him into telling it, for Torgadon was the Joker, a man of mighty laughter and idiot tricks. And Loken would tell it again, a tale rehearsed, so many retellings it almost told itself. Loken was always careful to make sure audience properly understood the irony in his story. It was likely that he felt some shame about his complicity in the matter itself, for it was a case of blood spilled through misunderstanding. There was a great tragedy implicit in the tale of the Emperor's murder, a tragedy that Loken always wanted his listeners to appreciate, but the death of Sejanus was usually all that fixed their attentions. as the warp-dilated warlocks could attest, the 203rd year of the Great Crusade, Logan always set the story in its proper time and place. The commander had been War Master for about a year since the triumphant conclusion of the Olenor campaign, and he was anxious to prove his newfound status, particularly in the eyes of his brothers. War Master, such a title. The fit was still new and unnatural, not worn in yet. It was a strange time to be abroad among stars. They had been doing what they'd been doing for 2 centuries, but now it felt unfamiliar. It was a start of things, and ending too. The ships of the 63rd expedition came upon the Imperium by chance. A sudden etheric storm, later declared providential by the Malagurst, forced a route alteration, and they translated into the edges of a system compromising 9 worlds. 9 worlds circling a yellow sun. Detecting the shoal of a rugged expedition warships on the stage at the outsystem edges, the Emperor first demanded to know their occupation and agenda. Then he painstakingly corrected what he saw as multifarious errors in their response. Then he demanded fealty. He explained, the Emperor of mankind. He had stoically shepherded his people through the miserable epic of warp storms, through the age of strife, staunchly maintaining the rule and man of law. This had been expected of him, he declared. He had kept the flame of human culture alight through the aching isolation of old night. He had sustained his precious vital fragment and kept it intact until such time he scattered the diaspora of humanity, re-established contact. He rejoiced that such a time was now at hand. His soul leapt to the sea, the orphan ships returning to the heart of the Imperium. Everything was ready and waiting. Everything had been preserved. The orphans would be embraced in his bosom, and then the great scheme of rebuilding would begin. The Imperium of mankind would stretch itself out across the stars, as was its birthright. As soon as they showed him proper fealty as Emperor of mankind. Sejanus was the commander's favorite, not as proud or irascible as Abaddon, nor as ruthless as Sedarai, nor even as solid and venerable as Iacton Kurz. Sejanus was the perfect captain, tempered evenly in all respects, a warrior and a diplomat in equal measure. Sejanus' martial record, second only to Abaddon's, was easily forgotten when in company with the man himself. A beautiful man, Logan would say, building his tale. A beautiful man adored by all. No finer in figure and mark foreplay than Astor Sejanus. That he is remembered and his deeds celebrated, even here amongst us, speaks of Sejanus' qualities. The noblest of the Great Crusade. That was how Logan would describe him to the eager listeners. In future times he will be recalled with such fondness that men will name their sons after him. Sejanus was with a squad of his finest warriors from the 4th Company, traveled in system in a gilded barge, and received for audience by the Emperor at his palace on the 3rd planet, and killed, murdered, hacked down on the onyx floor of the palace, even as he stood before the Emperor's golden throne. sought alternative paths away from violence, where such were workable. This was a mistake, he reasoned. A terrible, terrible mistake. Peace could not be salvaged. This emperor could be made to understand. It was about then, Logan liked to add, that a suggestion of quote marks began to appear around the emperor's name. It was determined that a second embassy would be dispatched. Malachurst volunteered at once. The commander agreed, but ordered the spear tipped forwards onto assault range. The intent was clear. One hand extended open in peace, the other held ready as a fist. If the second embassy failed, or was similarly met with violence, then the first would already be in position to strike. That somber day, Logan said, the honor of the spear tip, strength of Abaddon, Torquedon, little Horus Aximand, and Logan himself. At the order, battle musters began. The ships of the spear tip slipped forward, running under obscurement. On board, stormbirds were hauled onto their launch carriages. Weapons were issued and certified. Oaths of moment were sworn and witnessed. Armor was machined into place around the anointed bodies of the chosen. In silence, tensed and ready to be unleashed, the spear tip watched as a shuttle convoy began, bearing Malachurst and his envoys, arced down towards the third planet. As the building scads debris from Malachurst's flotilla billowed away in the atmosphere, the Emperor's fleet element rose up out of the oceans, out of the high cloud, out of the gravity wells of nearby moons. 600 warships revealed and armed for war. Abaddon broke obscurement and made a final personal plea to the Emperor, beseeching him to see sense. The warships began to fire at Abaddon's spear tip. My commander, Abaddon relayed to the heart of the waiting fleet, there is no dealing here. This fool impostor will not listen. And the commander replied, illuminate him, my son, but spare all you can. That order notwithstanding, avenge the blood of my noble Sejanus. Decimate this emperor's elite murderers, and bring the impostor to me. And so, Logan would sigh, we made war upon our brethren, so lost in ignorance. It was late at evening, but the sky was saturated with light. The phototropic towers of the high city, built to turn and follow the sun with their windows burning during the day, shifted uneasily as the pulsating radiance in the heavens. Spectral shapes swam high in the upper atmosphere, ships engaging in a swirling mass, charting brief, nonsensical zodiacs with the beams of their battery weapons. At ground level, around the wide basalt platforms that formed the skirts of the palace, gunfire streamed through the air like horizontal rain, hosing coils of tracer fire that dipped and slithered heavily like snakes. Die-straight zips of energy that vanished as fast as they appeared. The flurries of bolt shells like blizzarding hail. Down stormbirds, many of them crippled and burned. Littered 20 square kilometers of the landscape. Black humanoid figures paced slowly in across the limits of the palace sprawl. They were shaped like armored men, and they trudged like men, but they were giants, each each one 140 meters tall. Each 140 meters tall. The Mechanicum had deployed a half dozen of its Titan war engines. Around the Titan's soot-black ankles, troops flooded forward in breaking waves 3 kilometers wide. The Luna Wolves surged like the surf of the wave. Thousands of gleaming white figures, bobbing and running forward across the skirt platforms, detonations bursting amongst them, lifting rippling fireballs and trees of dark brown smoke. Each blast shuddered the ground with a gritty thump, and showered down dirt as an aftercurse. Assault craft swept in over their heads, low between the shambling frames of the wide-spaced Titans, fanning the slowly lifting smoke clouds into sudden energetic vortices. Every starry summit was filled with the vox chatter, mass-snapping voices chopping back and forth, their total engines roughened by the transmission quality. It was Logan's first taste of mass war since Olenor. Then the company's first taste too. There had been skirmishes and scraps, but nothing testing. Logan was glad to see that his cohort hadn't grown rusty. The unapologetic regimen of live drills and punishing exercises he'd maintained and kept them weighted as sharp and serious as the terms of oath the moments they had taken just hours before. 15 or so minutes of recording takes a toll on my voice. It's like all rough. Like I'm chewing on glass or something. I'm gonna continue, and if I do the next chapters, the audio quality will hopefully be better because I won't be printing anything. But also, will have practiced the whispering, and it will be less inconsistent. In any case, let's continue reading. We're on page 18 so far. Olenor had been glorious, a hard, unstinting slog to dislodge and overthrow a bestial empire. The green skin had been a promiscuous and resilient foe, but they had broken his back and kicked over his embers of his revel fires. The commander had won the field through the employment of his favorite practice strategy, the spear-tip thrust to tear out the throat. Ignoring the greenskin masses which had outnumbered the Crusaders 5 to 1, the commander had struck directly at the Overlord and his command, Coudray, leaving the enemy headless and without direction. The same philosophy operated here. Tear out the throat and let the body spasm and die. Logan and his men, and the war engines that supported them, were the edge of the blade unsheathed for that purpose. But this was not like Olenor at all. No thickets of mud and clay-built ramparts. No ramshackle fortresses of bare metal and wire. No black powder airbursts or howling ogre foes. This was not a barbaric brawl determined by blades and upper body strength. This was modern warfare in a civilized place. This was man against man. Inside the monolithic precincts of a cultured people, the enemy possessed ordnance and firearms, every bit the technological match of the Legion forces, and the skill and training to use them. Through the green imaging of his visor, Logan saw armored men with energy weapons this would be a test, equal against equal, like against like, except that for all its martial technologies, the enemy lacked one essential quality, and that quality was locked within each and every case of Mark IV power armor. The genetically enhanced flesh and blood of the Imperial Astartes, modified, refined, post-human. The Astartes were superior to anything they had met or would ever meet. No fighting force in the galaxy could ever hope to match the legions unless the stars went out and madness ruled and lawless sense turned upside down. For, as Cetres had once said, the only thing that can beat an Astartes is another Astartes, and they had all laughed at that. The impossible was nothing to be scared of. The enemy, their armored of polished magenta trim and silver, as Logan later discovered when he viewed them with his helmet off, firmly held the induction gates into the inner palace. They were big men, tall, thick through the chest and shoulders, and on the peak fitness, not one of them, not even the tallest, came up to the chin of one of the Luna Wolves. It was like fighting children. Well-armed children, it had to be said. Through the billowing smoke and jarring detonations, Logan led the veteran first squad up the steps at the run, the plasteel soles of their boots grating on the stone. First squad, 10th Company, Alipore Tactical Squad, gleaming giants in pearl white armor. The wolf had insignia stark black on their auto-responsive shoulder blades. Crossfire zigzagged around them for the defended gates ahead. The night shimmered with the heat distortion of weapons discharge. Some kind of upright automated mortar was casting a sluggish, flaccid stream of fat munition charges over their heads. Gillett, Logan heard Brother Sergeant Jubal instruct over the link. Jubal's order was given in curt argot of Cathonia. Their derivation world, a language that the Luna Wolves had preserved as their battle tongue. The battle brother carrying the squad's plasma cannon obeyed without hesitation. For a dazzling half-second, the 20-meter ribbon of light linked the muzzle of his weapon to the auto mortar, and then the device engulfed the facade of the palace in a roasting wash of yellow flame. Dozens of enemy soldiers were cast down by the blast. Several were thrown up into the air, landing crumpled and boneless on the flights of steps. Into them, Jewel barked. Wildfire chipped and battered off their armor. Logan felt the distant sting of it. Brother Callan stumbled and fell, but righted himself again, almost at once. Logan saw the enemy scattered away from their charge. He swung his bolter up. His weapon had a gash in the metal of the foregrip, the legacy of a greenskin's axe during Olenor, a cosmetic mark Logan had told the armorers not to finish out. He began to fire, not on burst, but on single shot, feeling the weapon buck and kick against his palm. Bolter rounds were explosive penetrators. The men he hit popped like blisters, or shredded like bursting fruit. Pink mist fumed off every ruptured figure as it fell. 10th Company, Logan shouted, for the War Master. The war cry was still unfamiliar, It was the first time Logan had declaimed it in war, the first chance he had since the honor had been bestowed upon the Emperor after Olenor. By the Emperor, the true Emperor, Lupercal, Lupercal. The wolves yelled back as they streamed in, choosing to answer with the old cry, the Legion's pet name for their beloved commander. The war hordes of the Titans boomed. They stormed the palace. Logan paused by one of the induction gates, urging his frontrunners in, carefully reviewing the advance of the company's main force. Hellish fire continued to rake them from the upper balconies of the tower. In the far distance, a brilliant dome of light lifted into the sky, astonishingly bright and vivid. Logan's visor automatically dimmed. The ground trembled, and a noise like a thunderclap reached him. A capital ship of some size, stricken and ablaze, had fallen out of the sky and impacted in the outskirts of the high city. Drawn by the flash, the phototropic towers above him fidgeted and rotated. Reports flooded in. Axeman's force, Fifth Company, had secured the Regency and the pavilions on the ornamental lakes to the west of the high city. Torquedon's men were driving up to the lower town, slaying the armor sent to block them. Logan looked east, 3 kilometers away, across the flat plain of the basalt platforms, across the tide of the charging men and striding titans, and stitching fire. Abaddon's company, First Company, was crossing the bulwarks into the far flanks of the palace. Logan magnified his view, resolving hundreds of white armored figures pouring through the smoke and chop fire. At the front of them, the dark figures of the First Company's foremost Terminator Squad, the Justarin. They wore polished black armor, dark as night, as if they belonged to some other Black Legion. Logan to first, he said, 10th as entry. There was a pause, a brief distort, then Abaddon's voice answered, Logan, are you trying to shame me with your diligence? Not for a moment, First Captain, Logan replied. There was a strict hierarchy of respect within the Legion, and though it was a senior officer, Logan regarded the peerless First Captain with awe. All the more of all, in fact, though Torquedon had always favored Logan with genuine shows of friendship. Now St. John's was gone, Logan thought. The aspect of the Mornival would soon change. I'm playing with you, Logan, Abaddon said, his voice so deep that some vowels were blurred by the fogs. I'll meet you at the feet of his false emperor first. First one there gets to illuminate him. Logan fought back a smile. Ezekiel Abaddon had seldom sported with him before. He felt blessed, elevated. To be a chosen man was enough, but to be with the favorite elite, that was every captain's dreams. Reloading, Logan entered the palace through the induction gate, stepping over the tangled corpses of the enemy dead. Excuse me. Reloading, Logan entered the palace through the induction gate, stepping over the tangled corpses of the enemy dead. The plaster facings of the inner walls had been cracked and blown down, and loose crumbs, like dry sand, crunched under his feet. air was full of smoke, and his visor display kept jumping from one register to another as it attempted to compensate and get a clean reading. He moved down the inner hall, hearing the echo of gunfire from deeper in the palace compound. The body of a brother lay slumped in a doorway to his left, the large white-armored corpse on and out of place amongst the smaller enemy bodies. Marjax, one of the Legion's apothecaries, was bending over him. He glanced up as Loken approached and shook his head. "Who is it?" Loken asked. "Tybor, of the second squad," Marjax replied. Loken frowned as he saw the devastating head wound that had stopped Tybor. "The Emperor knows his name," Loken said. Marjax nodded and reached into his Narthesium to get the reductor tool. He was about to remove Tybor's precious gene seed so that he might be returned to the Legion's banks. Loken left the apothecary to do his work and pushed on down the hallways. In a wide colonnade ahead, the towering walls were decorated with frescoes showing familiar scenes of a hollowed emperor upon a golden throne. How blind these people are, Loken thought. How sad this is. One day, one single day, with the iterators, and they would understand. We are not the enemy. We are the same, and we bring with us a glorious message of redemption. Old night is done. Man walks the stars again, and the might of these Starchies walks at his side to keep him safe. In a broad, sloping tunnel of etched silver, Loken caught up with elements of Third Squad. Of all the units in his company, Third Squad, Locasta Tactical Squad, was his favorite and his favored. Its commander, Brother Sergeant Nero Vipus, was his oldest and truest friend. "How's the humor, Captain?" Vipus asked. His pearl-white armor was smudged with slit and streaked with blood. "Phlegmatic, Nero, you. Choleric, red-raged, in fact. I've just lost a man, and 2 more of mine are injured. There's something covering the junction ahead. Something heavy. Rate of fire like you wouldn't believe it. Tried fragging it. 2 or 3 grenades. No effect, and there's nothing to see, Garvey. We've all heard about these so-called invisibles. The ones that butchered Sejanus. I was wondering." "Leave the wondering to me," Loken said. "Who's down?" Vipus shrugged. He was a little taller than Loken, and his shrug made the heavy ribbing and plates of his armor clung together. Zacchaeus, no. Torn into shreds before my eyes. Oh, I feel the hand of the ship on me, Garvey. The hand of the ship, an old saying. The commander's flagship was called the Vengeful Spirit, and in times of duress or loss, the wolves liked to draw upon all that implied as a charm, a totem of retribution. In Zacchaeus' name, Vipus growled, "I'll find this bastard invisible hand." "Soothe your color, brother. I've no use for it," Loken said. "See to your wounded while I take a look." I'm getting a little lightheaded, guys. And I'm worried that all this light discomfort is gonna not matter when I review my footage, and it sucks cock. But we're gonna keep reading until the end of the chapter at least, I think. as yet retrieved, lay in pieces at the center of the crossway, a steaming pile of shattered white plasteel and bloody meat. Vipus had been right. There was no sign of an enemy present. No heat trace, not even a flicker of movement. But studying the area, Logan saw a heap of empty shell cases, glittering brass, that spilled out from behind a bulkhead across from him. Was that where the killer was hiding? Logan bent down and picked up a chunk of fallen plasterwork. He lobbed it into the open. There was a click, and then a hammering deluge of auto fire raked across the junction. It lasted 5 seconds, and in that time over thousands of rounds were expended. Logan saw the fuming shell cases spitting out from behind the bulkhead as they were ejected. The firing stopped. Vaseline vapor fogged the junction. The gunfire had scored a mottled gouge across the stone floor, pummeling Sakai's corpse in the process. Spots of blood and scraps of tissue had been spattered about. Logan waited. He heard a whine in the metallic clunk of an autoloader system. He read weapon heat, fading, but no body's warmth. Want a medal yet? Vipus asked, approaching. It's just an automatic sentry. Logan replied. Well, that's a small relief at least, Vipus said, after the grenades were pitched in that direction. I was beginning to wonder if these vault invisibles might be invulnerables too. I'll call up a death center support too. Just give me a light flare, Logan said. Vipus stripped one off his leg plate and handed it to his captain. Logan ignited it with a twist of his hand and threw it down the hallway opposite. It bounced, visibly glaring white hot past the hidden killer. There was a grind of servos. The implacable gunfire began to roar down the corridor at the flare, kicking it and bouncing it, ripping it to the floor. Garvey, Vipus began. Logan was running. He crossed the junction, dumped his bag against the bulkhead. The gun was still blazing. He wheeled around the bulkhead and saw the sentry gun, built into an alcove, a squat machine set on four pad feet and heavily plated. It had turned its short, fat, pumping cannons away from him to fire on the distant flickering flare. Logan reached over and tore out a handful of its servoflexes. The gun stuttered and died. We're clear, Logan called out. Locusta moved up. That's generally called showing off, Vipus remarked. Logan led Locusta up the corridor, and they entered a fine state apartment. Other apartment chambers, similarly regal, beckoned beyond. It was oddly still and oddly quiet. Which way now? Vipus asked. We go find this emperor, Logan said. Vipus snorted. Just like that. The first captain bet me I couldn't reach him first. The first captain, said when was Garvey and Logan on pally terms with him. Since 10th breached the palace ahead of first. Don't worry, Nero. I'll remember you little people when I'm famous. Nero Vipus laughed, the sound snuffling out of his helmet mask like the cough of a consumptive bull. What happened next didn't make either of them laugh at all. This is chapter 2. This is where we're going to stop. I'm sure this wasn't pleasant at all, but it's sure going to be funny when I have it posted and say that I have it posted. If you want a like to, or part 2, hit the like button. If you subscribe, and he subscribes, well, who am I kidding? I'm completely bullshitting you. I probably won't do this again. But if you want me to, let me know in the comments below, and we'll make this slightly better quality. Maybe by the end of the book, we'll actually be at ASMR quality. But for now, I just don't have the setting for